In this video, I'm going to be reading a chapter from Muhammad, his life based on the earliest sources by Martin Lings. This is a truly extraordinary biography, and on the inside cover it says the following, and I heartily endorse these words. Martin Lings' Life of Muhammad is unlike any other. Based on Arabic sources of the 8th and 9th centuries, it owes the freshness and directness of its approach to the words of the men and women who heard Muhammad speak and witnessed the events of his life. Martin Lings has an unusual gift for narrative. He has adopted a style which is at once extremely readable and reflects both the beauty and the simplicity and grandeur of the story. The result is something that can be read with equal enjoyment by those already familiar with Muhammad's life and those coming to it for the first time. And the book won a number of awards when it was first published. So in this video, I'm just going to read chapter 1. Each of the chapters in this book is conveniently quite bite-sized, and one can read a chapter in each video, and I might just do that, God willing. So in chapter 1, entitled The House of God, Muhammad Asad writes, "The book of Genesis tells us that Abraham was childless, without the hope of children, and that one night God summoned him out of his tent and said to him, 'Look now towards heaven and count the stars if thou art able to number them.' And as Abraham gazed up at the stars, he heard the voice say, 'So shall thy seed be.' Abraham's wife Sarah was then 76 years old, he being 85 and long past the age of childbearing. So she gave him her handmaid Hagar, an Egyptian, that he might take her as his second wife. But bitterness of feeling arose between the mistress and the handmaid, and Hagar fled from the anger of Sarah and cried to God in her distress. And he sent to her an angel with the message, 'I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude.' The angel also said to her, 'Behold, thou art with child, and shall bear a son, and shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction.' Then Hagar returned to Abraham and Sarah and told them what the angel had said. And when the birth took place, Abraham named his son Ishmael, which means God shall hear. When Abraham had reached his 100th year, and Sarah was 90 years old, God spoke again to Abraham and promised him that Sarah also should bear him a son, who must be called Isaac. Fearing that his elder son might thereby lose favor in the sight of God, Abraham prayed, 'Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee.' And God said to him, 'As for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year.'" That's Genesis chapter 17, verse 20. Sarah gave birth to Isaac, and it was she herself who suckled him. And when he was weaned, she told Abraham that Hagar and her son must no longer remain in their household. And Abraham was deeply grieved at this, on account of his love for Ishmael. But again God spoke to him, and told him to follow the counsel of Sarah, and not to grieve. And again he promised him that Ishmael should be blessed. Not one, but two great nations were to look back to Abraham as their father. Two great nations, that is, two guided powers, two instruments to work the will of heaven. For God does not promise as a blessing that which is profane, nor is there any greatness before God except greatness in the Spirit. Abraham was thus the fountainhead of two spiritual streams, which must not flow together, but each in its own course. And he entrusted Hagar and Ishmael to the blessing of God and the care of his angels, in the certainty that all will be well with them. Two spiritual streams, two religions, two worlds for God, two circles, therefore two centres. A place is never holy through the choice of man, but because it has been chosen in heaven. There were two holy centres within the orbit of Abraham. One of these was at hand, the other perhaps he did not yet know. And it was to the other that Hagar and Ishmael were guided. In a barren valley of Arabia, some 40 camel days south of Canaan. The valley was called Becca, some say on account of its narrowness. Hills surround it on all sides except for 3 passes, one to the north, one to the south, and one opening towards the Red Sea, which is 50 miles to the west. The books do not tell us how Hagar and her son reached Becca. According to the traditions of the Arabs, accepted by most Muslims, Ishmael was still a babe in arms when Hagar brought him to the valley of Becca. Perhaps some travellers took care of them, for the valley was on one of the great caravan routes, sometimes called the incense route, because perfumes and incense and such wares were brought that way from South Arabia to the Mediterranean. And no doubt Hagar was guided to leave the caravan once the place was reached. It was not long before both mother and son were overcome by thirst, to the point that Hagar feared Ishmael was dying. According to the traditions of their descendants, he cried out to God from where he lay in the sand, and his mother stood on a rock at the foot of a nearby eminence to see if any help was in sight. Seeing no one, she hastened to another point of vantage. But from there, likewise, not a soul was to be seen. Half distraught, she passed 7 times in all between the 2 points, until, at the end of her 7th course, as she sat for rest on the further rock, the angel spoke to her. In the words of the book of Genesis, "And God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of the Lord called to Hagar out of heaven and said to her, What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise and lift up the lad, and hold him in thy hand, for I will make him a great nation." And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. That's Genesis chapter 21, verses 17 onwards. The water was a spring which God caused to well up from the sand at the touch of Ishmael's heel, and thereafter the valley soon became a halt for caravans by reason of the excellence and abundance of the water, and the well was named Zamzam. As to Genesis, it is the book of Isaac and his descendants, not of Abraham's other line. Of Ishmael, it tells us, "And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer." That's chapter 21, verse 17 to 20. After that, it barely mentions his name, except to inform us that the 2 brothers, Isaac and Ishmael, together buried their father in Hebron, and that some years later Esau married his cousin, the daughter of Ishmael. But there is indirect praise of Ishmael and his mother in the psalm, which opens, "How amiable are thy tabernacles, O Lord of hosts," and which tells of the miracle of Zamzam as having been caused by their passing through the valley. "Blessed is the man whose strength is in thee, in whose heart are the ways of them who passing through the valley of Baca make it a well." That's Psalm 84, verse 5 and 6. When Hagar and Ishmael reached their destination, Abraham had still 75 years to live, and he visited his son in that holy place to which Hagar had been guided. The Quran tells us that God showed him the exact site, near to the well of Zamzam, upon which he and Ishmael must build a sanctuary. And they were told how it must be built. Its name, Kaaba, cube, is in virtue of its shape, which is approximately cubic. Its four corners are towards the 4 points of the compass. But the most holy object in that holy place is a celestial stone, which, it is said, was brought by an angel to Abraham from the nearby hill Abu Qubays, where it had been preserved ever since it had reached the earth. The prophet said, "It descended from paradise, whiter than milk, but the sins of the sons of Adam made it black." This black stone they built into the eastern corner of the Kaaba, and when the sanctuary was completed, God spoke again to Abraham and bade him institute the rite of pilgrimage to Becca, or Mecca, as it later came to be called. "Purify my house for those who go the rounds of it, and who stand beside it and bow and make prostration, and proclaim unto men the pilgrimage, that they may come unto thee on foot, and on every lean camel out of every deep ravine." That's from the Quran. Now Hagar had told Abraham of her search for help, and he made it part of the rite of pilgrimage that the pilgrims should pass 7 times between Safa and Marwa, for so the 2 eminences between which she had passed came to be named. And later Abraham prayed, perhaps in Canaan, looking round him at the rich pastures and fields of corn and wheat. "Verily, I have settled a line of mine offspring in a tithless valley at thine holy house. Therefore incline unto them men's hearts, and sustain them with fruits, that they may be thankful." That's the Quran, chapter 14, verse 37. So this is a beautifully written book. Martin Lings was an Englishman, himself a revert to Islam. And God willing, I will read a chapter of this in each succeeding video over the coming weeks and maybe months. Till next time.